Welcome to Thursday Live. I appreciate you being here and joining me. I know a bunch of others are going to gather around with us, and some of you are going to join us later. And whenever you jump in, I'm just glad that you've decided to join with us. And Thursday Live is just an opportunity for me to, speak out of my own personal experiences in life. It's not a part of a church service where we're trying to do things in a way that can present in an auditorium. It's just, things I'm learning about, things I'm growing through, things I'm going through that I feel as a pastor, as a spiritual teacher, as a spiritual influencer, I might be able to help you, those of you who gather with us on Thursday Live, to deal with. And tonight's not going to be so much a discussion where I'm going to be fielding comments and going through those things. This Thursday Live, I just really want to spend some time sharing my heart, some things that have been going on recently, and then maybe helping you to gain a perspective of how you can better follow Jesus, which is my goal as a person, certainly my goal as a pastor, and certainly my goal for anyone that allows me to influence them spiritually. And so, again, welcome to Thursday Live. And I want you to know that I'm going to kind of focus backward and then forward. I'm going to focus backward to this past weekend at Northridge. And if you're not a part of Northridge, so glad you joined me for Thursday Live. It means a great deal to me. But I am going to be addressing a conversation that I engaged this past weekend on the platform at Northridge in my Hope series, as we were talking about, never-ending hope, the fact that Jesus is coming back. And I did something that to a lot of people felt different, felt out of the blue, felt out of character to them. And it's because they were processing it, I think, with a different lens than I was trying to put on it. And so I thought it'd be good to have a conversation with you about what's been going on since, what I've been experiencing and thinking, and then how I'm trying to be more like Jesus through this time. And it's not any huge deal. There's not any huge uproar. But if you haven't seen my talk from this past weekend, I encourage you, as a part of getting ready for this or as a part of a follow-up, going to northridgechurch.com and watching it on demand, or go to the Northridge YouTube channel and you can see it, this past weekend talk, Never-Ending Hope. But just what's been spurring me is there's just been a lot of discussion, which is good, right? When people come to church, it shouldn't just be ordinary. They should, it should be a catalyst for discussion and growth. But just as a bit of context, as an example of how we should live differently if we really believe in and are staking our lives on the hope that Jesus is coming again, that this moment isn't all we have, that this life isn't all we have, that there's more for us to consider, and that should affect our values and our choices and every aspect of our lives. And then I gave an example that ultimately led to a discussion about, in Michigan, if you're from another state, you might not know this, a ballot issue in Michigan, Proposition 3, which is seeking to amend the state constitution of Michigan with a right to abortion for anyone at any age, including minors, without parental notification, parental knowledge, or parental involvement of any kind. And that then it goes way further than Roe versus Wade did, and it actually allows for abortion to happen at any time and stage in the pregnancy, including partial birth abortion all the way through the last term. We know that babies are being saved at 22 weeks, and they're wanting abortion to take place all the way until the end of term. And some of the language even makes it harsher than that. And then they also throw in the idea that without parent notification, parent knowledge, parent consent, parent involvement of any kind, kids can start seeking infertility issues and sex change issues. And it's just, to me, this is a spiritual issue. It's a values issue. It's a morals issue, and it has nothing to do with politics. In fact, I said in my talk that, there are two other propositions, Proposition 1, Proposition 2. Both of those are political propositions. I have strong feelings about them. I have personal beliefs about those issues, but those aren't Jesus' first issues. Those aren't, I can't follow Jesus if I don't vote one way or another on these. But Proposition 3, in my estimation, is very different. And I tried to speak with both truth and grace, truth and love on the issue, and made it clear that I am unabashedly pro-life. Can't imagine anyone coming to any other decision from a biblical paradigm. But I said very clearly that I believe that even those who hold a pro-choice view should really consider whether or not they want to amend the state constitution with this particular ballot issue, because it goes too far for most pro-choice people, way too far. And I encourage you to research and do your own. But that's just a synthesis of what I talked about. But I want to talk now about the response. People started buzzing about it. And I had a meeting with our creative team. I get to meet occasionally with our creative team, lay out the direction of teaching and all those different things. And this wasn't one that was laid out ahead of time. But they were saying, oh, man, we're having all kinds of people come to us and talk to us, and we're just wanting to know, your thoughts on this so we might represent well in responding and see how we can engage it. And I opened myself up to their questions, to their discussion, to their thoughts, and shared with them. And they just told me that a lot of people are having a hard time processing it. And as I listened to the discussion on that, I realized that people are having a really hard time processing it for a lot of reasons. I think mostly, and this is natural, they view it through their own political lens. They view what I talked about through their own traditional lens. So many people, when it comes to partisan politics, this is how my daddy believed, this is how my mom believed, or this is how, the people I respect believed, and all that. And the truth is, we're not called to follow our traditions, our human legacies, the people we respect the most decision. We're called as believers to follow Jesus. And in the end, when we're not conforming to the world, but we're allowing Jesus to renew our mind, we're totally transformed. We should be different. And I have to be honest, I'm not pursuing an honoring of my heritage or my parents. I'm pursuing in everything I do an honoring of my Savior. He's the one that's changed my life. He's the one that's going to come again. He's the one that's given me never-ending hope. And he's the one ultimately, the only one ultimately, that I need to please. I can have 1 billion people tell me, well done, you good and faithful servant, but if Jesus doesn't say it, it's worthless. And if everybody rails against me, but Jesus says, well done, that's what I'm for. And I think as a spiritual guide, as a spiritual influencer, I want to help people try and move more closely to that pattern. That's what I want for you. And I'm not perfect at it. Oh, I fail so much. In fact, this coming weekend in our Hope series, I'm going to be talking about hope after failure. And I certainly know a bit about that. But so with the creative meetings discussion and the discussion about how people are trying to process it and they're wanting to know how to answer them, I just thought, you know what? I have Thursday Live. Why shouldn't I share it with you? And then you can share it with others if you want. And it can help you to form a way to have positive conversations about this, I hope. Because Thursday Live is where I just get to discuss things that are raw and personal, and I think can be helpful to you. So hopefully it will help you to see through the proper lens, at least understand me. And I want to share some things right on the top that you should know. If if you haven't known me for a long time, if you're not a part of Northridge, you haven't been a part of Northridge, we're just not a typical church. We're a very unique church. And I grew up in churches that were, I didn't become a believer until later in my teenage life, but I grew up in churches that were fairly aligned in partisan beliefs. For a time more on the left, and for a time more on the right, and they align. And many of you probably know of churches like this and kind of view churches through that lens. That hasn't been Northridge. Northridge has been clearly apolitical under my leadership for the last 32 years. For 32 years, I've not wanted man-made politics and man-made partisanship and man-made agendas to in any way cloud or confuse or add fog to the clarity that Jesus gave us in his truth. As well, I never wanted, things that are only temporary, like man-made politics, to hinder me from being able to speak the hope of Jesus to everyone Jesus died for God so loved the whole world. And so if I ever claimed a political alliance, I would immediately no longer be able to share hope with everyone who disagreed with that. And so I've been dogging on that. And so Northridge hasn't changed at all in that regards. That's the first thing to know. We still hold to the same clear philosophy. We're about Jesus, Jesus first, Jesus truth, Jesus love, and that only. But the truth is, in our world and our culture, every once in a while, the world is seeking to create a pathway that will totally contradict God's truth. And when that happens, I think it needs to be spoken to, because then it's not a political man-made temporary issue. It's a Jesus-given eternal issue. And if we don't speak to it, people are never going to find the hope and the freedom that comes through Jesus' truth. And so I need you to know, another thing to know, I haven't changed my philosophy. I'm not called to be a political guide. I don't want to be a political guide. I have people trying to get me to speak to political issues all the time. I have not changed. I am not a political guide. It's not my calling in life. You want those? They're all over the place. I've been called to be a spiritual guide. But when a clearly spiritual issue becomes intertwined because of what people are trying to doing with something that's political, and we have the ability to make a choice, I think it's my calling to point it out. And that's what I did this last weekend. And I want you to know that as a pastor, as a person first, as a pastor, I'm still seeking to follow Jesus and in every way I can. To be honest with you, I have very strong partisan views. I try to vote Jesus. I try and align with that which I think would most promote or stand with or protect Jesus' values, even if the representatives don't reflect Jesus' values. Because very often in the political realm, I don't care which side you're on, they're not going to reflect Jesus all that well, often. Not all, but often. And I just need people to know I'm still seeking to follow Jesus sincerely with all of my heart in my own failed way. And here's where I want to start getting really relevant to your life. You need to know, when you seek to follow Jesus, that following Jesus isn't always comfortable. It's just not. Following Jesus isn't always the smoothest path, the path with the least obstacles, the path with the least resistance. That's not what following Jesus is. The truth is, it's very often the opposite. Following Jesus is the most difficult path, because we live in a world this is 2 Corinthians 4:4, whose culture and ideas and philosophy are authored more by Satan, the evil one, than they are by Jesus. And, you're against strong headwinds when you're trying to follow Jesus. I mean, Jesus spoke truth in love. And as a result, though he drew in multitudes, and I understand a little bit about drawing in large crowds, he lost multitudes. So he'd draw multitudes and then he'd turn multitudes away. And he'd draw multitudes and he'd turn multitudes away. And I know what it's like to gain a lot of people and lose a lot of people. I've experienced it in my lifetime, but I've always found comfort not in trying to do that, but in the fact that Jesus did too. And Jesus lost people when he spoke truth in love from the secular world, of course, from the pagan world, of course, but he also lost the majority of people from his religious world. I mean, he got attacked from every side. And he said if he was hated, then those who follow him would be hated as well. And that's exactly the truth. And here's how I like to say it. When you really speak truth in love, you're putting yourself in the center of a 360-degree circle of people, and you don't have a protected side. You can get nailed from every side. Example, maybe this is more clear. When you speak truth with some grace, then you're going to have all the truth people supporting you, and you might have the grace people, 180 degrees of you being attacked by the grace people because you're compromising grace a little, but the truth people are going to have your back. If you speak 100% grace, but you speak a little truth, you compromise truth a little bit, then the grace people will have your back. You're not going to get attacked by them because you're saying exactly what they want to hear, but the truth people will attack you. But when, like Jesus, you try and speak 100% truth in 100% grace, you find yourself, like he was, attacked from every single side because you're not playing to anyone's agenda in that crowd. And if you think about it, he's the only one that could ever do it perfectly. And by speaking perfectly in truth and grace, there was only one place left for him, and it was nailed to a cross. And he said, if you follow me, the people who attacked me are going to attack you. And so I've often tried to evaluate my life. If I have 100% of one group's support and 100% or close to it of another side's conflict or tension or disagreement or attack, I'm probably not perfectly placing myself like Jesus with truth and love, in truth and grace. You should be maybe getting hit from all sides in one way or another. And that's what I want to tell you has happened to me this week following last weekend. And all of this is going to lead to an application for you, a so what for you, okay? But just to give you some explanation, the truth is, the same thing that happened to Jesus is happening to me this week, and not to the same degree. No one's got out their hammers and their nails, and no one's, put me on a cross, that kind of deal. And I'm not in agony over this thing and all of that. I don't want to pretend it's worse than what it is. But the same really is happening to me from inside and outside the church. Getting some support and attack from inside, getting some support and attack from the outside. And it's interesting, though it's about very different issues, I'm experiencing it from the politically left, of course, because therefore anything goes when it comes to abortion. They can't hear anything except a woman has the right to choose. It's so weird how we can put that out there as some kind of sacrosanct, spiritual, God-given idea that a woman has the right to choose. When we're talking about the life of a baby, it's just odd. I mean, we don't say people have the right to choose to do wrong ever. A man has the right to hurt other people. No, he doesn't. Just like a woman doesn't. It's like, a man has the right to lie if he wants to. Well, he can certainly choose to do that, but in God's eyes, that's a problem. So and so the politically left obviously is against what I'm saying. And we have some of that inside and outside the church, of course. And then what might surprise many of you, you'd think, oh, he's being celebrated by the right. And kind of, but it had a short-term, lifespan, because on the politically right, when they heard that I got up and said something about this issue, they got excited. It started being passed around, and then we started getting calls, and here's the kind of thing. And by the way, I understand all of this. I'm not attacking anyone. I'm just sharing what I experienced. They wanted to come and put huge billboards up on the property at Northridge, vote no on Proposition 3 and all those different things like you've seen in other places, just huge ones. And I said, no. We're a place that to all people, we're an open door, an open invitation. We are not a political campaign center. We are not a political paraphernalia center. We don't want people not to walk in the doors of our church because of some political stuff going on. We want them to come in and then be able to hear truth in love. Truth in love. And the truth is you can't contextualize a huge billboard on your campus, truth in love, because people just see that and they feel like you're just smacking down, a bunch of the population. And then some people on the right were saying, well, let us come in and put lawn signs in the lobby and all kinds of different things and flyers, and we can just go out and spread it around. And again, I said, no, we're not a political campaign center. There are all kinds of places whose mission is to tell the truth about that issue. They're political campaign centers. They're places that can do that, and anybody who wants to get involved can go there. But we're a church that needs to reflect Jesus' truth and love and perfect things. So the way we want to tell the truth is when we can do it clearly with truth and love and in a context of spiritual teaching. And we were attacked a little bit by some of these people saying, I don't agree with that, that's wrong, we're dealing with life, all of which I agree with. They saw my message, but because I'm not surrendering to the mission of their organization, the mission of their agenda, the mission of their community deal, we're trying to be this church, got hit there. I've been invited to political campaign rallies, against Proposition 3. I have no desire to speak at a campaign rally. Because once again, now I'm not speaking to the world Jesus' truth and grace as a spiritual influencer. Now I'm becoming, at least in perception, a political guide. And can I just say, I have no problem with people who go to rallies. I have no problem with people who do yard signs. I have no problem with people who do billboards. I have no problem with any of that. But as a church, we are commanded to reflect Jesus, to be an open door for people to come in, not to tell them what they want to hear, not to surrender to what they want us to do, whether it's left or right, whether it's about campaign signs or some other issue. But we are a place that's an open door to invite everyone in to experience the love of Jesus Christ and his truth uncompromised, like I tried to do this past weekend. And so that we've experienced the tension all the way around. And I haven't been put up on a cross, but I feel like I'm in the middle of tension from every angle, and it's not the perfect evaluation, but it feels healthy that I don't have one side or the other in 100% agreement with me, but there's tension in all areas, which is exactly what Jesus experienced. And so as a Jesus follower, in order to cope with this for years and years, I've had to know how he did it. And I'm going to just give you a simplified version of this. Hopefully it'll help you. He told us in John chapter 2, verses 24 to 25, how he did it. He was being celebrated. People were trying to lift him up as king, and he knew in 2 seconds when he didn't surrender to their agenda, they were going to, rip him apart and nail him to a cross. And he wasn't going to play to their game. He wasn't going to buy their praise for him. And this is what he said, John chapter 2, verses 24 through 25. But Jesus would not entrust himself to them. He wouldn't surrender himself. He wouldn't let them, lift him up as king and do all that. Jesus wouldn't entrust himself to them, for he knew all people. He knew the reality of all people. He said he did not need any testimony about mankind, for he knew what was in each person. He knew the minute he didn't say yes to everything they wanted from him, they would dismiss him on either side from where they are. And boy, that's been my experience. Isn't it funny? People can call us and text us and do all these things celebrating. It's so great to hear you say this. Will you put up billboards in your thing? No. And then they start attacking you. Jesus knew that would happen. So he never surrendered himself to the whim of the audience, to the praise of the audience. He never surrendered himself to the scorn of the audience and to the hatred of the audience. The truth is, many who started out absolutely despising him, like Saul of Tarsus, who became the Apostle Paul, started out despising him, hating everything he stood for. Because he spoke the truth to them, they found freedom and hope and redemption. And then many of the people that embraced him in the beginning attacked him in the end when he didn't give them everything they wanted. I mean, there are tons of people in Scripture, it's just obvious about, Demas has forsaken me for love of this present world. So it's like, you can't play to the audience. You can't accept their praise, or you can't be defeated by their scorn. You can't do it. You'll go through cycles of it when you've been doing ministry as long as I have, when you've been trying to follow Jesus as long as I have. And so the key for me, and for you, if you really want to follow Jesus, the key for me is to play to an audience of one. Jesus knew what was in mankind. One minute they'd be following, the next minute they wouldn't. One minute they'd be supporting, the next minute they'd be attacking. One minute they'd be praising, the next minute they'd be destroying. I mean, he knew that the very people praising him at one instance would be nailing a cross, in his hands. And the people who were nailing crosses in their hands because of his love and truth could one day find hope, and did. And so he didn't play to the audience of mankind. He didn't surrender to it, good or bad. He played to an audience of one. God's pleasure. And by the way, he did it perfectly. I don't. I make all kinds of mistakes. I don't have perfect clarity on all these issues. I'm doing my best to follow Jesus in a way that I believe has integrity and sincerity and is true to Scripture. I really do. And then I try and, trust him and look to him and find his celebration. And when I missed it a little bit, then I try and make adjustments, because at least I'm sincere in my desire to play to an audience of one in these areas. And again, I fail just like everyone else fails, but this is my lens, play to an audience of one. And I just want to say it to you. For you to follow Jesus, you have to decide that you're going to play to an audience of one. You're not going to allow negative critique, negative responses, rejection of you to keep you from following Jesus. You're not going to let the praise and pleasure and affirmation of people lull you over to one side, an agenda which could ultimately then lead to you not following Jesus, because like Jesus, you know what's in mankind. You know that's all temporary. And what you really want is, well done, you good and faithful servant. You want God's pleasure, God's applause, God's smile. That's the only thing worth living for, because it's the only thing that's eternal. It's the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that ultimately will fill us up to the full. And so I just want to encourage you, play to an audience of one. Hope you'll be praying for me as I try and offer leadership on this. I'm sure that some of you disagree. You'd like to see the campus filled with billboards and lawn signs. Just know this, they're available everywhere. But they don't have to litter our campus when we're trying to speak the truth and love of grace. And some of you are just, I can't believe you're doing this. Women have rights to choose, blah, blah, blah. Get the government out of our thing. I'm just telling you right now, look at that amendment proposition. It's crazy. And even if you're pro-choice, it goes too far, way too far. And then I'd even consider your view of being pro-choice in light of biblical truth about that. And that's for another time. But anyway, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. Again, it wasn't about a discussion with all that's going on with your comments and all that, though I appreciate your comments. I appreciate you. Hope you're being kind. And I just wanted to give you that follow-up. Play to an audience of one. I'm trying to, as the pastor of Northridge, as a Christ follower myself, as a dad, as a granddad, play to an audience of one, because I think I'll be a better person, a better dad, a better granddad, a better pastor, a better friend, better citizen, if I play to the eternal meaning of God's pleasure instead of the temporary and very vacillating meaning that comes with being celebrated by other people. And I like to be encouraged. And I hate to be scorned. But in the end, the only thing that's going to matter is where Jesus stands on me. And he's the one I want to follow. Hope that makes sense. Would you pray with me? God, I thank you for every single person who joined me for Thursday Live this week. For those who are new, I pray that they'd come back and see us. I pray, God, that you would give us your grace, your spirit, your power to follow Jesus to the greatest of our capacity. And God, I do pray for the issues facing us as human beings. Some here are facing real personal issues. I pray for them to experience your grace and be drawn closer to you, not be pushed further away from you. And I pray for what's going on in our state, the state of Michigan, with Proposition 3. Please, God, I pray that you'd do something great. You'd part the Red Sea, and you'd help the value of life and goodness to win in this, in my view, and be with each person who's grappling with this, and help every single one of us when we pull a ballot lever, when we talk to our families, when we make choices in how we live our lives. Let each and every one of us seek to always play to an audience of one. And when we fail, may we come back to your grace and your forgiveness and allow you to redeem us. And we'll thank you for it in Jesus' name. Amen. All right, everybody, thanks so much. I want you to know this coming weekend, as I already mentioned earlier in this time together, I'm going to be dealing with hope after failure. So the only ones of you who shouldn't come and the only ones you shouldn't invite are the people who've never failed. Otherwise, this talk will be a relevant conversation, hope after failure. And more than anything, I really do hope that I'll be able to see you next week for Thursday Live. Thanks for joining me, everybody.